Before we come to the next business, I have a brief statement. This morning, the government published the Strategic Defence Review. The Prime Minister made a speech and held a press conference in Glasgow, in addition to other media appearances. This shows complete disregard for the House and for the honourable members. I note that ministers, when they were in opposition, were not slow to complain when the previous government made major policy announcements outside Parliament. It's amazing in opposition how everything should be discussed on the floor of the House, but when in government, memories are short on that fact. What has changed? I'll tell you what's changed. Disregard for the members who sit on the back benches. I am here to defend the back benches, so please, I hope we have no more of this. Leader.
I responded to an urgent question on a similar matter on the 14th of May. I reiterate the commitments I gave then. I am satisfied that this government is coming to the House regularly to keep Parliament informed.
Rubbish.
I recognise...
Order! I'm not satisfied. I think that's the key, because both backbenchers, quite rightly, should hear it first. I don't care how many have been done in the House, it's the ones that's not been done we should be talking about. Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I say, it will be made this afternoon by the Dissent Secretary, and I am satisfied. I would point out to colleagues we've got an important second reading debate today, of which there are dozens and dozens of speakers down to speak in. So we are now doing 2 urgent questions before a very important statement and then other business as well. So we do have to try and balance these things.
I'm sure that criticism was aimed at me for granting 2 UQs. The reason we granted 2 UQs is because we didn't come here with the Strategic Defence Review. Otherwise, we won't be having, and there will be no pressure on time. Jonathan Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I've now been told something else. That members of industry, representatives of industry, were allowed to see the SDR at 10:30.
What?
This is a multi-billion-pound industry. That's highly market sensitive, Mr. Speaker.
I'm very disappointed that if industry have seen this Strategic Defence Review, members of this House, members of the Select Committee of Defence haven't seen it. There is something fundamentally gone wrong here. I really do believe we need the answers, and it might be worth, and it's up to the leader, I'm not under pressure, that she goes away, gets some answer, comes back to the House. The fact that journalists have been allowed to see it, but defence people who's got skin in the game before MPs here, I am very, very concerned.
In a moment of extraordinary tension in the House of Commons, Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle publicly torched the government for what he called a blatant disregard for Parliament and backbench MPs. The outrage was sparked by the government's decision to unveil the Strategic Defence Review not on the House floor, but through a media blitz orchestrated by the Prime Minister himself, complete with a press conference in Glasgow and widespread media appearances. According to Hoyle, this act wasn't just inconsiderate, it was a fundamental insult to democratic process. He ripped into the government, pointing out the hypocrisy of ministers who, back when they were in opposition, demanded transparency and parliamentary scrutiny, but now, in power, conveniently forget those principles. Hoyle didn't hold back. In his blistering remarks, he declared flat out, "What has changed? I'll tell you what's changed: disregard for the members who sit on the back benches." He made clear that his role was to defend Parliament, not serve as a rubber stamp for government PR strategies. He blasted the government's excuse-making, especially Labour's Lucy Powell, who insisted they were keeping Parliament informed. But Hoyle immediately cut in with a damning line: "I'm not satisfied." And that was the moment things boiled over. With surgical precision, the Speaker dismantled the government's defence, saying it's not about how many times they appear in the House. It's about what critical matters they deliberately avoid bringing here first. Even more shocking, it was revealed during the session that representatives from private industry were given access to the full Strategic Defence Review before members of Parliament or even the Defence Select Committee. That revelation, brought to the floor by MP James Cartledge, sent a jolt through the chamber. Hoyle's reaction was instant and furious. He called it fundamentally wrong, and said it was very, very concerning that market-sensitive documents tied to billions in defense spending were shared with industry insiders and journalists, but not with elected lawmakers. It was a scathing indictment of a government caught prioritizing headlines and insider access over transparency and accountability. The chaos wasn't just procedural, it was political. In granting 2 urgent questions, UQs, Hoyle made clear that it was only because the government had failed to bring the defense review to Parliament in the first place. He even mocked the implied criticism that time was tight because of the added UQs, sarcastically reminding Powell, "That's because you didn't bring it here." This exchange didn't just expose bureaucratic sloppiness. It revealed something deeper. A growing frustration in the Commons with how major decisions are being broadcast to cameras before they're debated by the elected representatives of the people. And in calling out this behavior so forcefully, to their faces, Sir Lindsay Hoyle didn't just defend parliamentary procedure. He called Labour's bluff, highlighted their hypocrisy, and made it clear that if they want to play politics with national security, they'll have to do it under the full glare of democratic accountability.
And today, following through on this review, I want to set out 3 fundamental changes that we're going to deliver. First, we are moving to warfighting readiness as the central purpose of our armed forces. When we are being directly threatened by states with advanced military forces, the most effective way to deter them is to be ready. And frankly, to show them that we're ready, to deliver peace through strength. Now, Britain has the finest servicemen and women in the world. We're showing them the respect that they deserve by delivering the biggest armed forces pay rise in 20 years, and by pledging today that we will end the hollowing out of our armed forces. We'll build a fighting force that is more integrated, more ready, more lethal than ever, backed by a stronger strategic reserve, fully trained and ready to mobilise at any time. Second, everything we do will add to the strength of NATO. As we step up to take greater responsibility for our collective defence, the NATO alliance means something profound. That we will never fight alone. It is a fundamental source of our strategic strength. That's why our defence policy will always be NATO first, something that's written through this review. The transformation we are driving in our defence must add up to Britain's biggest contribution to NATO since its creation. So that when we're building new capabilities at home, we are making our allies safer too, strengthening Europe and strengthening our bridge to the US as Britain's first partner in defence. Third, we will innovate and accelerate innovation at a wartime pace, so we can meet the threats of today and...
Keir Starmer stood before the cameras, trying his best to channel the aura of a decisive leader. But what came out was little more than hollow posturing wrapped in tired Cold War rhetoric. His speech, full of dramatic phrases like war-fighting readiness and peace through strength, sounded less like a strategic vision and more like a desperate audition for a role he's woefully unqualified to play. This wasn't leadership, it was cosplay, complete with buzzwords and empty gestures meant to impress the military establishment and appease hawkish allies. Starmer's announcement of the largest armed forces pay rise in 20 years was meant to signal respect for British servicemen and women, but in reality is a political bribe, a distraction, a way to buy silence while his government doubles down on a militarized agenda that risks dragging the UK deeper into global conflicts without public debate or democratic oversight. His pledge to end the hollowing out of the armed forces is laughable when his own party spent years undermining public trust in national institutions and now expects us to believe they've suddenly become defenders of military integrity. Worse still is his blind loyalty to NATO, repeating the tired mantra of NATO first, like a schoolboy reciting lines he barely understands. Starmer treats the alliance not as a partnership, but as a shield to hide behind, a justification for militarization, surveillance, and unchecked foreign entanglements. His declaration that this will be Britain's biggest contribution to NATO since its creation should alarm anyone who's watched how past governments have used international alliances to justify disastrous wars and bloated defense budgets. And as for his promise to innovate at a wartime pace, that's not vision. That's a green light for arms manufacturers and defense contractors to line their pockets with taxpayer money in the name of national security. Starmer isn't innovating, he's imitating. Imitating the same establishment politics that got us into this mess in the first place. In a time when Britain needs diplomacy, economic renewal, and actual leadership, Starmer offers sound bites, militarism, and a dangerous nostalgia for an empire that's long gone.